Well, Friday was exciting, wasn't it? I wasn't expecting Steam to announce the Steam Deck last Friday. I had heard rumours about it, and it was pretty much confirmed that they were going to be releasing some hardware, but nobody really knew what was coming. And then Friday came along, and not only did they announce it, but they put it up for pre-orders, and I was beside myself with excitement. I don't think I've been this excited for a piece of hardware since, well, the last time I was excited for a piece of hardware. So probably last year. No, seriously, this is a piece of hardware that has really got me excited. I am over the moon about this, and so much so that I immediately went in and tried to pre-order it. And as you can see here, I finally did manage to pre-order the 512 gigabyte NVMe SSD version. Unfortunately, as you can probably see here, it's not arriving until Q2 2022. And that's the first problem for me. Will we actually see this one by the end of the year? How many people will actually have it in their hands? I actually said on my Discord that I thought we wouldn't be seeing it until next year, and that the only people who are really going to have this in their hands this year are going to be reviewers and a few high-profile YouTubers. Everyone else is going to be waiting. And even this Q2 2022, I'm not convinced that it's going to arrive then. I can see it getting put back as they have problems with hardware. And look, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we all know that both Microsoft and Sony are having problems with getting hardware for their consoles. And you can't buy a graphics card, you can't buy CPUs, all sorts of stuff is not easy to get hold of. And I can't see that Steam are going to have much of an easier time than the rest of us getting hold of parts. Certainly not an easier time than Microsoft or Sony anyway. So that was my first issue after having problems with actually going in and being able to order it in the first place, because that was a bit of a shit show as well. I wouldn't say it was as bad as the PlayStation or the Xbox, but it was certainly a nightmare. And I actually gave up trying to pre-order it. And then I was popping back sort of every 20 minutes, half an hour, and not really sitting there waiting to order because I thought it was gone. But eventually I just went in, and all the problems I was having with telling me that was in the wrong region and something went wrong. And then it thought it went through on PayPal. And then I went back to Steam and there was no sign of it. And then I went back to PayPal and there was no sign of that either. So that was a pain in the ass. But like I say, I have got my order set up. And as you can see, it's here, but Q2 2022. Yeah. But anyway, enough of the order shenanigans. What do I actually think about the product itself? Well, as you've already heard, I was extraordinarily excited. And as a handheld, this could be the panacea. It could be the one we've all been waiting for. But hold your horses, because if something seems too good to be true, it usually is. And if we go over to Steam Deck, their actual website for the Steam Deck, you can see here the most gaming power you've ever held. And it is a beast. It is powerful. It says here, powerful, comfortable, versatile. And yeah, it looks like a good piece of hardware. But if we actually go into the hardware specs, if we go down here, comfort, thumbsticks, triggers, and all the rest of it, a lot of marketing garbage. 7-inch touchscreen, trackpad, gyro, all the usual things, all the things you would expect. The trackpads, I never had a Steam controller, so I don't know how well they work. But I'm hoping this will work well and it'll emulate sort of using a mouse. And with the gyro, it does look interesting, but obviously until we get hands-on, who knows? And some people have mentioned, if we go back, see if I can find an actual... Yeah, if we go back here, some people have mentioned that it looks odd. If you look here, the layout looks odd. And, I have to admit, the layout does look bloody odd. And again, until people get it in their hands, and I know some people have gone along to Valve and tried it, but, they're in the industry and they've been invited along. So it's going to be a controlled environment. It's not going to be the real world. So they say that these work well. And up until now, I believe them. But until I get it in my hands, I'm not really going to comment on that. But let's just go down a little bit further, because we got fast storage. This is interesting. Fast storage, you've got the 3 different SKUs. And if we just go back into the pre-orders, you can see them here. 64 gig, 256 gig, 512 gig. This one here, the 64 gig. Yeah, not sure about that one. eMMC. I don't think it's going to be big enough, and I don't think it's going to be fast enough either. Certainly not for PC games, just because PC games are huge. And we haven't got the same sort of thing that we've got with Xbox, with smart delivery and stuff like that. So they're going to be the same size as they would be on the PC, unless Valve come up with some other way of doing it. The 256 bit better NVMe SSD, and then the 512, which is the one I ordered, obviously, NVMe SSD. And this one's the fastest one as well. The NVMe SSD in this one is faster than in this one, in the 256. How much faster? Again, we can only go by what we've been told so far. Until people do benchmarks, we really don't know. But if we go back, we've got expandable I/O. Single USB-C jack is multi-purpose, used for charging peripherals or even throwing the game onto a big screen at the same time. So that's pretty good. You can put it on a big screen and you can use all your USB-C peripherals and Bluetooth ones as well. As it says here, Wi-Fi keeps you connected to the world, and Bluetooth allows for a wide variety of wireless peripherals. So that's good. Hi-Fi audio, well, again, we're going to have to wait and try that one out. 40 watt hour battery. Now, the battery life on this, they were saying from 2 to 8 hours. So that's going to vary a lot. And I would err on the side of caution with this and say most of the time it's going to be on the lower end. So you're going to have to be carrying a portable charger around with you, if that will work with it, because I don't know if those will work yet. Fast suspend and resume, yeah, whatever. Well, that's good, but you know. The other thing is you can see here they're showing an SD card. Expand your library with micro SD. Yeah, you're not going to be running full power PC games off a micro SD card, are you? Now, if you want to use it as an emulation device, assuming you can get emulation working on it, and I would imagine you would, I'll get to that a bit later on. Yeah, the SD card's nice, but not that nice in terms of being able to run games off it. So, yeah, who knows with that? We'll have to wait and see on that one as well. But, yeah, the SD card's not going to be much use for that kind of thing. Now, I have heard, and it's pretty common knowledge now, that the Steam Deck does have an internal Nvme slot, so you can fit another drive. However, I've also heard that it's not easy to get into the Steam Deck. So, again, until we get hands-on, until people start doing teardowns, we're not going to know if we can get inside this thing and have a look inside and see where the NVMe SSD card goes. We don't even know, if you fit it, whether the firmware and software, all the rest of it, will be set up in such a way that it'll actually work with an NVMe SSD. I'll give you an example. The PlayStation 5 has an NVMe slot, but currently it's disabled. So just having a physical slot doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. So don't get too carried away on that one. So let's go down, see if I can find the actual specs list. Can we find a specs list here? Tech specs. Sorry, I'm just going into. If we go into tech specs, this is an actually interesting screen. You can see here the way they've got it laid out. Again, it looks a bit strange, but it might be okay. Some people say it's good. We'll have to wait and see. You got your volume, you got your headphone jack. It's good to see it's got headphone jack as well as Bluetooth. That'd be handy if you've got, legacy headphones lying around, which I have a few. Your fan, how loud it's going to get, that's going to be interesting because it has got some pretty beefy specs in there. Type-C port, power button, status LED, all the usual stuff. You've got your usual paddles and your triggers, and they're analog triggers by all accounts. And then on the back here, this is interesting. R4, R5, L4, L4, L5. Now, I think it definitely needs something like this because obviously you're going to need more buttons with certain PC games. And it still remains to be seen how games that use keyboard and mouse are going to work with this thing, on the go. So, yeah. But we'll get to games a bit more in a minute. Let's just go down to the actual hardware specs. And it says speeds and feeds. Processor is an AMD APU, Zen 2. And I'll let you read this stuff. It says it's next gen, or they're saying it's next gen. Not really. You compare it to most powerful PCs, it's not up there at all. And if you compare it to consoles, I think a lot of people were saying it's kind of in the ballpark of an Xbox One, not a series, an Xbox One S. So, I mean, that's no slouch, but it's not cutting edge. And you wouldn't expect it to be, not in a handheld. Still pretty beefy for a handheld. But, when you consider that it's 4 cores, 8 threads, in the PC space, we're moving away from 4 cores, 8 threads to higher core counts and higher threads. So it could get left behind on that one. Bearing in mind that it is using games that are Steam games. So as newer games come out, you may have problems with scalability there. Again, we'll have to wait and see. Now, the RAM, it's got a beefy amount of RAM, 16 gig of LPDDR5. So, yeah, that's not something that is to be discounted, because that's pretty impressive. Storage, we've already gone over that, 64, 256 and 512. I would go for the 512. Now, you could take a risk and go for the 64 or something and hope that you can fit an NVMe drive. But I've already mentioned we don't know what's going on there. They've added this. The socket is a 2230 M2 module. And those cards aren't easy to come by all accounts. In fact, I think I was looking for one because Now, I might be wrong on this, and if I'm wrong on this, correct me in the comments. I think that's the same size card that the Xbox Series S and X uses. Maybe. I was looking into this a few weeks ago because I had some crazy idea that I was going to go in there and see if I could fit a bigger drive into the Series S. And I was looking into that, and I think that was the 2230 M2. But as I say, let me know in the comments, and if I'll check as well, and I'll go in and I'll add it as a comment if I find that it's different. But when I was looking, I couldn't find those drives, and other people have gone looking for these particular drives as well. And yeah, not easy to come by. So even if it does work, both from hardware and software, you might find it's difficult to get a drive to fit in there anyway. Gamepad controls, thumbsticks. These are all things we'll find out. Haptics, trackpads. This is all good stuff. Then we get into the display. The resolution's 1280 by 800. I've got no problem with that at all. It's a 16 by 10 rather than 16 by 9, which is a bit odd. But that's not such a big deal in the PC space as I understand it. I mean, basically, you're going to be running stuff at 720p. And I think on a handheld, which has got a 7-inch diagonal screen, that's not a problem at all. I think that's going to look very, very clean and crisp. Again, until we get it in our hands, we don't know, but I wouldn't have any issues with that at all. And at 60 hertz, so games are going to run nice and smooth. Assuming the hardware, this stuff, the processor, and CPU and GPU on an APU, is going to handle running at 60 hertz. But yeah, we should be fine. And like I say, running at 720p, it's going to take a lot less power and grunt than running at 1080p or 4K on a standard PC. So you should be able to get quite a lot out of this thing, which is cool. Touch-enabled ambient light sensor and all the usual stuff. Bluetooth, I've already mentioned. Wi-Fi, it's got Wi-Fi. Audio, I mean, I'll be using it with headphones anyway most of the time, so that's cool. It's got a dual microphone, which is handy. If you're using it with a Bluetooth headset, though, you use the headset mic, so it should work okay on that. Input, output, battery, 40 watt-hour battery, 2 to 8 hours, as they say. I've already covered that a bit. Micro SD, again, talked about that already. Size and weight. It's going to be bloody hefty. 669 grams, so it's going to weigh a lot. Now, if we just go back up here, It's going to weigh a lot. And I actually think having these at the top might help with that, because you're not having it tip in your hands. Anyone who's used a phone in one of those grips where the phone's kind of above the grip, it kind of tips your hands forward. Anyone who's used one of those will be looking at this and thinking, actually, that's probably why they've put these at the top. Because if you put them at the top, it's not pulling your hand forward in the same way that it would be if they were in the middle. And okay, they've had to accommodate for the trackpads as well, but I would think those are the two things that have led to this design. And I think they've obviously thought about this. They've thought it through. Whether it actually works or not is another matter, but yeah, they have thought it through. So where were we? Display, connectivity, audio, power, expansion. Expansion, talked about that as well, size and weight. Software, operating system, SteamOS. Now, this is where it gets interesting because, just before we do that, it's got HDMI 2.0 output and it's got an Ethernet. So it will have a dock as well. Oh, and we're just talking about the dock here. We'll have an official dock, but they've already said it will work with your standard USB docks. So brilliant. It is very open and that's brilliant. And that is really, really good. That is fantastic. That you might be able to put other operating systems and all the rest on it, but we'll get to that in a minute. SteamOS, that's interesting. And this is where it starts to, it's all very well saying you can do this. We get this a lot in the computer industry. You can do it. Whether you would want to and how easy it is another matter. And so let's just talk about that for a moment. I've said here I've got some concerns with SteamOS. Now, SteamOS comes with something called Proton. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but SteamOS only runs some games. And some games are those basically that run on Linux, which means you're going to have a problem with games that are Windows only. And the way Steam gets around this, if you're running Steam on a Linux box, is that they have this thing called Proton. Now, Proton allows for Windows games to run under SteamOS. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on this. I've never really messed with it because I'm not a Linux guy. I used to play around with Linux back in the day, but I haven't touched it for years. But that's basically what this does. It allows you to run Windows games on a Linux system. So if you look here, we've got Proton, their website, and it lists the games that work and all the rest of it. So, you can go through and have a look at this. I'll put a link into this in the comments so you can have a look. And Steam say that they are going, or Valve say they're going to try and make it so that all of the games that are available on Steam will run on the Steam Deck. But saying that's what they intend to do and actually being able to deliver it is another matter. And, whether they'll work at all is debatable in some instances. And if they do work, will they take a performance hit? And if that's the case, will you maybe want to install Windows? So then when you're talking about, do you want to install Windows? Are you looking at getting rid of SteamOS and installing Windows, at which point you can run all Steam games? But then if you're doing that, are you having a performance hit on those games because you're running Windows, which obviously has more of an overhead than Steam? So then that becomes an issue. And these are all things that we need to wait and find out about. So you might get slowdown, all the rest of it. Then, of course, from there, you've got, can you use other storefronts? Now, let's see what it says under developers. Your games are going places. No more porting required. And then it goes on about the SteamOS thing. But I've heard there was a round table that they did, and they were asked, can you use other storefronts? So you're looking at things like GOG, Uplay, EA Play, Epic Games Store, all that kind of stuff. And they said, oh, it's a PC, so yes. Well, yeah. But things like, for instance, the one that really interests me is, will you be able to get Game Pass running on it? Now, SteamOS, Linux, can you run Game Pass on there? No, I don't think you can. I mean, if you're a Linux guy and you've managed to get Xbox Game Pass running on your box, let me know. But these are questions. And the next question that comes from that is, if you can get it to run, how easy is it to get to run? And I'll come back to ease of use in a minute. The other ones that you've got to think about is streaming services. I mean, you're talking about Game Pass, that leads us into xCloud. Maybe you could get around it by using xCloud. Well, there will be a browser. You're going to be able to use Chrome. And I think on Linux, you can even use Chromium Edge. So you should be able to get xCloud to run. And if you can do that, you could probably run Stadia, probably run GeForce Now. Whether you'd want to run GeForce Now, given that you're on a Steam Deck and you've got all those games available anyway, well, that's up to you. But I mean, people might want to play around with that. So that's interesting. Then you've got obviously Amazon Luna, PlayStation Now. Well, PlayStation Now only runs from an app. You can't run it in a web browser. So whether you can get PlayStation Now up and running on it, again, if you install Windows, then yeah, you should be able to do that. But the OS, SteamOS, will it work with that? Again, who knows? And then we get into emulation. Now, emulation shouldn't be an issue. And you could put your your emulation ROMs on your SD card because that's not an issue for emulation. And I don't think that will be a big deal. I think emulation should be able to get up and running. But emulation brings up an interesting point in as much as emulation is always a pain in the ass to get running anyway. Most of the time. I mean, you can get some games running and then you have to tweak with others. You can spend hours and days and months and years sorting out an emulation device. And that's not going to be any different for the Steam Deck. But, you know, that's not a criticism of the Steam Deck. That's just the way it is with emulation. And then, of course, you get into general computer use. You've got the dock coming out. It'll work with third-party docks. So you're going to be able to use it with keyboard and mouse and all the rest of it. And you can plug it into your monitor. You'll be able to use it as a low-powered PC as well. Again, what apps are going to work? Now, I think most of them will. You know, things like stuff like browsing. Obviously, we've already covered that. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Windows, and Linux apps. Which ones will work, which ones won't. For most people, I don't think they're going to be that bothered about that kind of thing. But this is the thing for me. And this is the real crux of the matter here is all this aside, you know, you've got all this great hardware, you've got your great tech specs and it looks good. It's a bit big and bulky, but hey, you know, it looks fantastic. It looks like it might have a decent screen and all the rest of it. But ultimately, all these questions about SteamOS and Windows and all the other stuff come back to one thing. And that one thing is ease of use. If you open this up out of the box and you can turn it on and it works, and you can add things like Xbox Game Pass easily, and if you're into things like Stadia, you can add them easily, and you can add your emulation and do that as easily as you ever can on emulation. If you can do all that, and you can do it to the level at which you want to. Obviously, some people aren't going to be bothered about emulation because it can be a pain in the arse. But a lot of people are going to want to add their Xbox library and, you know, alongside their Steam library. If you can turn it on and those things can be set up in a matter of half an hour or something and it all just works, then this is going to sell like hotcakes, this thing. People are going to love it. If it's a bit more difficult than that, then it's only going to appeal to the niche. It's only going to appeal to the PC guys who want a portable PC. And if you're going to have to frig around with things like Proton and all sorts of other third-party apps to try and make things work, then again, it's only going to appeal to a niche. Nevertheless, having said all that, I think this is unbelievably exciting. I said that at the beginning. And I will wait kind of with bated breath to see what others' reviews are, because obviously, if we go back here, I'm not going to be in the first wave talking about these when they first come out, because I'm going to have to wait till at least halfway through the year or quarter two and within the year before I get mine. But I am going to be hanging on everything they say about this until I get mine. And I am going to be watching Digital Foundry, and I am going to be watching Eurogamer and PC Gamer. If you look here, I've got these articles up. I'm going to be following everything about this thing because this, where I was really disappointed about the Switch OLED, when I saw this, the first thing I did was jump in here and try and order it because I knew what this could be. At the moment, it's all potential because it's not out yet, but it could be amazing. And I hope it is. But anyway, that's what I think. I've been going on a bit now. This is a bit longer than I intended, but I just wanted to put this out there. I know a few people have asked me what I think about this, so I wanted to make a quick-ish video and talk about it. Hope I've covered everything you wanted me to cover. If there's anything else you want to talk about with me, come in the comments or come across to my Discord and we can discuss it. In the meantime, give us a thumbs up, all usual nonsense. And I am going to go and grab myself a cup of tea, a shower, and then I'm off into town with my lad because he's on summer holidays. Speak to you in the next one. Bye.